The US suddenly scared me to death. The situation is about to change drastically. Highest-level talks for 21 hours. Officially declared a breakdown. There is no room for maneuver. Trump immediately issued a kill order to the Pentagon. Deploy the US Navy. Completely blockade all Iranian ports. Completely cut off Iran's oil export lifeline. Many people are confused. Why was this negotiation doomed to fail from the start? The answer is actually very simple. Three core deadlocks are unsolvable. Coupled with deep strategic opposition, there were no winners in this game from beginning to end. And the ones who will ultimately pay will be ordinary people worldwide. This was not an ordinary negotiation, but the highest level face-to-face talks in 47 years, since diplomatic ties were severed in 1979. After multiple mediations by Pakistan, the core negotiation teams of the two countries met in Islamabad for 21 hours behind closed doors, ultimately parting on bad terms. A complete breakdown. This outcome seems unexpected, but it was actually destined, because from the moment they sat at the negotiating table, both sides harbored completely opposing and irreconcilable strategic scripts. The core U.S. demand was to use negotiations to completely lock down Iran's strategic capabilities, making it permanently unable to challenge U.S. hegemony in the Middle East, thereby consolidating its own energy dollar system. Iran's bottom line was to lift unilateral sanctions and regain the right to normal national development, defending its sovereignty and dignity. These two goals are essentially mutually exclusive, coupled with the long-term depletion of international credibility by both countries. There was no trust between the two sides, nor any third-party guarantees that could truly function. Even if the U.S. made superficial concessions, Iran would not dare to believe it. This negotiation fundamentally lacked a political basis for success. A breakdown was only a matter of time, and what crushed this negotiation were three core deadlocks, with no room for negotiation. The first deadlock was the fundamental opposition over control of the Strait of Hormuz. This was the most core issue, with the least room for reconciliation. And it is critical to global energy security. The U.S. side pressed hard in the negotiations, insisting on joint control of the strait, actually attempting to seize dominance and control the passage rules, essentially to consolidate energy dollar hegemony and firmly control the global energy flow lifeline. Iran, on the other hand, has repeatedly stated through official channels its clear rejection of any form of joint control. According to Iran's Fars news agency on April 12, the Navy of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued a statement reiterating its complete control and management of the Strait of Hormuz, clearly stating that currently only non-military vessels are allowed to pass according to specific rules. Any warship attempting to pass will be met with a strong response. This is not Iran being tough, but its non-negotiable strategic bottom line and its core leverage against U.S. sanctions. The Strait of Hormuz is the lifeline for global energy transport. In 2025, an average of 20 million barrels of crude oil and petroleum products will pass through this strait daily, accounting for about 25% of global seaborne oil trade and 19% of liquefied natural gas transport. Over 90% of Qatar's and the UAE's liquefied natural gas exports must pass through this strait. Countries like Iran, Iraq, and Kuwait are highly dependent on this strait for their oil exports. For the United States, if it cannot control the Strait of Hormuz, its global maritime hegemony system will have a fatal flaw. Its ability to harvest global wealth through the energy dollar system will be greatly diminished. This is a strategic loss it absolutely cannot accept. For Iran, control of the Strait of Hormuz is a natural strategic advantage granted by its geography. It is the killer alkali to counter U.S. maximum pressure. Handing it over to the U.S. will be tantamount to admitting defeat. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is responsible for the strait's defense. For years, they have focused on fast boat swarms, mine warfare, and anti-ship missile systems. They have now achieved real-time monitoring of all vessels in the strait. The core objective is to have the ability to blockade the strait. At critical moments, this is their most important strategic bargaining chip. If they give it up, they will not only lose their country's energy export channel protection capability, but also completely disintegrate their regional deterrence. This agreement has had no possibility of reconciliation from beginning to end. The second deadlock was the unfreezing of Iran's frozen overseas assets. The core of this agreement was the U.S. lack of sincerity in negotiations, using assets as strategic leverage to control Iran. The third deadlock was the U.S. demand for Iran to cease its regional influence and its support for proxy forces. Iran's refusal to compromise on its national security interests. According to Iranian sources, the U.S. has agreed to release Iran's frozen assets in banks in Qatar and other countries. Iran views this move as a significant signal for a peace agreement and clearly stated that the asset freeze is directly related to safe passage in the Strait of Hormuz. But as soon as these words were spoken, White House officials publicly denied the report. This kind of flip-flopping behavior precisely exposes American hypocrisy. Iranian Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf posted on social media on the 10th, explicitly listing the unfreezing of all Iranian overseas assets as one of the preconditions for negotiation. Currently, the U.S. is in deep financial distress, with high national debt and stubborn inflation. Every frozen Iranian overseas asset is a crucial tool for them to pressure Iran. Easily unfreezing them would not only admit their sanctions failed, but also weaken their deterrent effect on other countries. The previous concession was merely a strategy to get Iran back to the negotiating table and buy time for their own military deployments. For Iran, however, unfreezing assets is the most basic and easily achievable concession from the U.S. Iran's economy has been severely hit by long-term sanctions, with export revenues accounting for over 80% of the country's foreign exchange earnings. Domestic livelihoods and infrastructure construction urgently need these funds to alleviate hardship. The U.S.'s repeated backtracking has not only completely killed the space for negotiation and concessions, but has also made Iran completely abandon any illusions about the U.S. The third deadlock is Iran's red line on enrichment issues. The positions of the opposing sides are completely incompatible. This is a direct clash between hegemonic demands and the defense of sovereignty. The U.S. demands Iran completely abandon its enrichment program and hand over all enriched materials, setting this as a non-negotiable red line. The core objective is to appease Israel and its Middle Eastern allies and maintain the regional security order it dominates. If Iran retains enrichment capability, countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE would likely follow suit and start their own nuclear programs, leading to an uncontrollable proliferation in the Middle East. According to the IAEA's latest quarterly report, Iran's current total stockpile of enriched uranium has reached 3,809 kilograms, which is 18 times the limit set by the JCPOA. Of this, 43.1 kilograms are 60% enriched uranium, approaching the 90% purity needed for nuclear weapons. Arms control experts analyze that Iran's current technology can quickly increase the concentration of enriched uranium to 90%. In the Middle East relies heavily on its allies, with Israel as the core pivot. Although Israel possesses a de facto nuclear arsenal, it adheres to a policy of neither confirming nor denying, and has a robust missile defense system. If Iran were to possess nuclear weapons, it could still pose a fatal threat to its core cities. This is something the U.S. absolutely does not want to see. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson clearly responded that the IAEA's report has a political bias, is one-sided and unfair. Iran firmly defends its legal right to peaceful nuclear energy, as granted by the Non-Proliferation Treaty. This is crucial for its energy independence and ultimate security. Iran is not absolutely refusing a deal, but the prerequisite is a multilateral nuclear agreement endorsed by the UN Security Council and establishing a long-term verification and guarantee mechanism. Without reliable guarantees in a bilateral framework, it will never give up its nuclear power red line, not even half a step. Besides these three core deadlocks, the differences between the two sides on other issues are also difficult to bridge, further accelerating the breakdown of negotiations and exposing the hypocrisy of the U.S. negotiations. For example, regarding the issue of whether Lebanon should be included in the ceasefire scope. During the negotiations, the U.S. initially stated it supported including Lebanon in the ceasefire arrangements, but after Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke with Trump, the U.S. immediately changed its tune, explicitly stating Lebanon would not be included, only asking Israel to exercise restraint. Behind this inconsistency lies the deep binding force between the U.S. and Israel. Israel's strategic goal is to eliminate Hezbollah forces on its northern border, and Hezbollah is an important Iranian ally in the region. The U.S.'s change of stance is actually accommodating Israel's strategic demands and aims to win over Israel to jointly contain Iran's influence in the Middle East. This also made Iran completely see the true nature of this negotiation. It's not about peace, but a delaying tactic by the U.S. Iran has therefore further lost its sincerity in negotiations. The three deadlocks have completely doomed the path to negotiation. The three deadlocks have completely poisoned the path to negotiation. The negotiations had barely broken down when Trump immediately deployed a crippling blow that had previously devastated Venezuela's economy. A complete naval blockade. He threatened to use the U.S. Navy to blockade all Iranian ports and coastal areas, allowing passage only for ships traveling to non-Iranian ports. He openly declared regarding the Strait of Hormuz that Iran would absolutely not profit from oil exports, and the U.S. actions were faster than their words. Currently, the U.S. Navy's Ford and Carl Vinson carrier strike groups are deployed in the Persian Gulf. Meanwhile, multiple C-17 transport aircraft and KC-135 refueling tankers have also arrived at Diego Garcia, providing support for long-range bomber deployments. On the surface, the U.S. military has fully prepared the capability for complete blockade, but in reality, they are already in a dilemma. This is precisely why the U.S. sought to delay through negotiations. In fact, this negotiation was a meticulously planned delaying tactic, with no genuine intention to resolve issues. Current U.S. domestic political pressure is mounting, and public support for long-term overseas intervention is continuously declining. Congress's attitude towards additional war funding is becoming increasingly cautious. Furthermore, recent conflicts have significantly depleted U.S. military readiness supplies. Precision-guided munitions and air defense interceptors are severely lacking in inventory, making a new large-scale offensive difficult to sustain in the short term. He needs to delay through negotiations to complete military deployment and replenish supplies. Combining this with the White House's latest statement on April 13th, the U.S. president clearly stated his firm support for Israel's security and that his national security team is in continuous communication with Israeli officials to counter Iran's airstrikes. This statement also indirectly confirms the hypocrisy of the U.S. negotiations. The negotiations themselves were for military deployment and coordinating with allies, buying time, not genuinely seeking a peaceful solution. However, even with deployment complete, the U.S. military has no guarantee of victory. Iran's nuclear facilities are mostly deep underground, dispersed, and equipped with comprehensive air defense systems, making conventional airstrikes insufficient for complete destruction. Special operations deep within Iran have a low success rate, and casualties are difficult to control, even if the U.S. military chose to seize islands in the Persian Gulf. In the narrow waters, Iran's hidden firepower, including anti-ship missiles and drones, can cover most areas. U.S. forces occupying islands would immediately become targets. Whichever path they choose, the U.S. military will be mired in a strategic quagmire of high costs, high risks, and low returns. This is the core concern, preventing the U.S. from acting rashly. Faced with U.S. military deterrence and deceptive tactics, Iran has not yielded an inch. Instead, it has directly retaliated, proving its strength with concrete actions, clearly warning the U.S. that Iran possesses numerous unused counter-leverage, sufficient to inflict a heavy price. As of April 13th, Iran had already taken retaliatory actions. On the evening of the 13th local time, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued a statement, using drones and missiles to launch precise strikes on key military targets in Israeli territory, successfully hitting and destroying the targets. This was a strong response to Israel's previous provocations, and a direct warning to the United States that any action supporting Israel or harming Iran's interests will be met with Iran's decisive retaliation, with no mercy. Iran's confidence extends far beyond this. Besides being able to lock down the Strait of Hormuz at any time, it's led Middle East resistance front, including Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen, can simultaneously blockade the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, creating a pincer movement on global energy routes. If these two straits are blocked, global energy supply will be paralyzed. This is Iran's core capital for daring to confront the U.S. directly, and it is precisely for this reason that Iran's chief negotiator issued a direct warning to the American people. Considering the current trend of rising oil prices, it won't be long before Americans will desperately miss the days of $4.5 per gallon gas, and this pain will soon spread to every ordinary person globally. The continuous escalation of the situation has already been directly reflected in global markets. The situation has already directly impacted global markets. The market has voted with its feet, preempting the risks of escalating tensions. And this is just the beginning. Since the outbreak of this conflict, U.S. domestic gasoline prices have risen by over 40%. In some areas, gas prices even exceeded $8 per gallon. After Trump announced the blockade and Iran launched airstrikes, international oil prices jumped accordingly. Futures also fell sharply. Market panic continues to heat up. As of April 13, 2026, New York WTI crude futures closed at $98.72 per barrel. London Brent crude futures sold at $96.85 per barrel. This week's cumulative gains were 8.78% and 8.2% respectively. In this round of conflict, oil prices only peaked at $111.80 per barrel. The International Energy Agency also issued a warning. Current global crude oil inventories are continuously declining, and the Strait of Hormuz handles over 30% of global seaborne oil trade. If the situation continues to escalate and passage through the strait is interrupted, the global crude oil market will face a severely tight situation. Multiple international agencies estimate that Brent crude will quickly surge to $120 per barrel. In an extreme scenario, it could even break the 2008 record of $147.50 per barrel, surpassing the historical peak, and then exceed $150 per barrel. This will not only cause inflation in the U.S. to rebound completely, but will also directly impact the global energy supply chain, leading to a surge in global oil prices, bringing huge economic pressure to all oil-importing countries, and the travel and living costs for ordinary people will also see a new surge. Considering the current situation, the direction of this game is already clear. For Iran, delaying tactics will only benefit the U.S. in recovering strength and completing military deployments, but not in consolidating its current gains or easing domestic economic pressure. It will also allow the U.S. to gradually gain the initiative Iran knows very well that its position at the negotiating table always depends on its performance on the battlefield. Only when the opponent truly feels pain will they sit down for serious negotiations and be willing to make concessions. Therefore, Iran must actively increase military pressure on the U.S. by precisely striking U.S. military bases and supporting regional allies to continuously increase the cost for the U.S. to maintain its military presence. At the same time, deepen strategic cooperation with other major powers in areas such as energy trade, financial settlement, and technological cooperation to build alternative mechanisms for de-dollarization, to effectively alleviate the economic pressure from unilateral sanctions and firmly grasp the initiative in this long-term game, defending its sovereignty and interests. From a broader geopolitical perspective, the current Middle East is undergoing profound restructuring. The unipolar hegemonic system is unsustainable. The trend of Middle Eastern countries pursuing strategic autonomy is increasingly evident. The U.S.'s ability to forcibly dominate regional affairs is systematically declining. If the U.S. continues to insist on military pressure and attempts to force Iran to submit through blockades, sanctions, and military threats, it will eventually be trapped in the Middle East quagmire, not only consuming vast national strength, but also completely losing its influence in the Middle East. If Iran can maintain strategic focus and persist in the struggle, relying on its strategic advantages and regional influence, and uniting regional allies, it will surely gain the respect and development space it deserves, and will also promote the Middle East's geopolitical landscape towards a fairer and more balanced direction. This game is not just a contest between Iran and the U.S., but a contest between hegemony and sovereignty, power and justice. Its ultimate outcome will profoundly affect global energy security and the geopolitical landscape. Having said all this, you must have questions. Will the U.S. naval blockade this time really happen as planned? Will the situation between Iran and the U.S. continue to escalate? And will military conflicts continue to break out? Once oil prices exceed $150, how much will our travel costs increase? Please leave your thoughts in the comment section. Thank you for watching today's Dafe Global Geography. If you like our content, please like, share, and follow to get the latest updates on global geopolitical situations. I'm Dafe. See you in the next video.